Tonight, Alex, our show's a little bit different. We're going to go from talking specifically to players and talking about the playing lifestyle. We're going to move into the business side of things, specifically within the NBA, and talk with somebody who has been on multiple sides and has the understanding from both the player's perspective, the front office, and all of that, and kind of roll it into one.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from a business background myself, just out of college, I've always been so intrigued with this side of the industry, right? Just to your point, we've talked to numerous coaches, players, skills trainers, you name it. And I always love hearing about the game and the on the court stuff, but it's not too often we get to hear really about the underbelly and how the deals get done and how things happen behind the scenes. So I'm really excited that we have Matt on tonight.
Yeah, so let's bring our guest in tonight. Our guest has served multiple capacities now relating to the NBA. He's worked for some of the biggest names in the sports industry, including Excel Sports Management and ASM Sports, working for Andy Miller, who is by far one of the most famous sports agents in all of sports. He now spends his time working for his own venture, Babcock Hoops, covering the NBA draft as an analyst and a talent evaluator. Matt Babcock, welcome into the show. How are you, my friend?
Hey, guys, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we are really excited to, like Alex said, to dive into the business side of the NBA and talk about that, especially coming off of having Dan Istel on a few weeks ago and really specifically talking about his playing days and now obviously expansion into Louisville. But I want to start by asking you about your college days. You told us last time when we had you on the Big Red Louie podcast about your few seasons that you spent at Arizona as a walk-on for the basketball program. During that time, you got to spend a lot of time with Lute Olsen, who just passed away a few days ago. I wanted to just ask you to start the show, your memories of Lute and how he's kind of influenced your basketball journey.
Sure. Yeah, just give you a little background of how I ended up at Arizona. So I, out of high school, I was recruited by some Division I schools, but I wanted a little bit better and was deciding between going to a prep school and going to a junior college. I decided to go to a JUCO in Florida. To make a long story short, I hurt my knee, missed my entire freshman year, and then went back for my sophomore year to kind of have the same approach of increasing my stock and whatnot. Hurt my knee again. Kind of went back to the drawing board again, and then decided, with my family that, I need to probably just get to as big a program as I possibly could because I wanted to pursue a career working in basketball. At that time, I thought it would be in coaching or scouting. I grew up in Arizona, and so when Lute Olsen and his staff welcomed me to the program as a walk-on, I didn't think twice. And so I went there. The idea was I was going to walk on for a year. I still had 3 or 4 years of eligibility left. So I went there, and then the day before practice started my junior year, or what I guess, eligibility-wise my freshman year, but, it was my third year in school. I was ruled ineligible. And so it was a deal where the NCAA stepped in and not all of my credits had transferred. And so I didn't have enough credits for how many semesters I've been in school, some stupid NCAA technicality. But I was on the team with Lute. Lute was my coach. And, having grown up in Arizona, I mean, the guy at the time was just a living legend. And, he'd walk in the room, everybody would drop everything to listen to him speak. Just really, a gentleman that really knew how to carry himself and speak and rally the troops. I just feel very privileged just to spend some time with him. And unfortunately, I never had a chance to actually, play because I was only there for 1 year, and then I started working in basketball. But hey, what a heck of a time just being there for a year and seeing how he operates.
That's what I was going to say. Just to even be around a legend like that, and just taking even the off the court learning and experiences, I'm sure he instilled in you guys is. It's such a cool experience because a lot of players never get the chance to play for a coach like that. But take me back to your first memories of basketball, and especially how that kind of sets you up for a future in the NBA, whether it be on the court or off.
Well, I mean, it's I was born into a basketball family, so I mean, my first memories were probably being on a basketball court, really. And,
right.
My dad was a college coach for 15 years before he started working in the NBA, and now he's been in the NBA for, I believe, 23 years. My two uncles were general managers in the NBA, and so basketball has always been life. I mean, it's day to day. It's our hobbies. It's our, it's everything. And I mean, we get to the dinner table, we talk about basketball. I wake up in the morning, I call my dad, we talk basketball, and it's same thing goes with my cousins. And again, it's a way of life. We all just love basketball. It's all we talk about. It's all we think about. And so it's all I've ever really known.
I have a
Yeah,
quick question before
sure, go
Jacob
ahead.
interrupts. Have there ever been any major arguments at a holiday dinner table? I figured between so many people in sports, especially around the same sport, there had to be some sort of like
Well, I
just
got a
back
story
and
for you.
forth.
So my two cousins work in the NBA. Chris and Nate, they're a year apart. Chris is a year younger than me, and Nate's 2 years younger than me. And we're in Phoenix over Christmas one year. I think we're in college, and we're watching basketball, and we were talking about players and just comparing notes. Hey, I like this guy, or I don't like that guy. And my two cousins got in a heated argument, and the little brother punched out the other one, talking about basketball. And so it's a funny story. We had our Christmas photo the next day with my cousin Chris. Had a nice shiner.
Nice.
Told the family some kind of excuse that he tripped or something, and it was a story I told at his rehearsal dinner when he got married. So there's been a few of those, just little petty little fights. We they're my cousins, but they're like my best friends and brothers, and
Right.
we've had that was a story between them, but we've also had our own times too.
Yeah, well, you're
That's
not a
awesome.
true basketball family until you've had some sort of related basketball fist fight. I believe that
Sure.
that's written somewhere in the rules of basketball. But you mentioned your family and your ties to the NBA with your uncles both being general managers and your dad working in the front office and as a coach. Tell me a little bit about just what you remember as a kid and growing up with them doing that, and like what you thought they did versus later on maybe what you learned that they were actually doing, and then maybe kind of talk a little bit about what your biggest takeaway was and how you were influenced most by their careers respectively.
Well, I mean, everybody at this point sort of labels me as, a kid that grew up in the NBA, which was true. But I mean, I think the most influential part of my family's careers was my dad's as a college coach. And so, I mean, my really formative years as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, all the way until middle school, was as a college coach's son. I mean, I remember being on, team buses and going on, trips for, Thanksgiving tournaments and stuff like that. And just pretty much just shadowing my dad as he's, going on recruiting trips or, day-to-day practice or pre-game talk, prep, pre-game prep talks and all that. That's really what stuck with me and like really what made me in my mind a true basketball person of being a coach's son. And then during that time, my uncle Pete was a pretty high-powered general manager that was kind of in the prime of his career. He was general manager of the Denver Nuggets and then the Atlanta Hawks for a long time. And and kind of just getting a taste of the NBA, visiting him, and we always got awesome Christmas gifts, Atlanta Hawks gear and all that. So I kind of had a nice balance of, the nitty gritty part of basketball, being a college coach and the recruiting and all that, but also the glitz and the glam of the NBA and kind of like the inner workings of how that worked. And then when when I got to 8th grade, my dad took a job in the NBA. And that's really when I really started getting a grip of how the NBA works and just, again, just shadowing my dad. I mean, I really spent my whole life just following him around and seeing how he operates and picking his brain. But to answer your question, my time as a college coach's son has definitely been the most influential to me.
And reading up just on, the early stages of your career in life, I knew you went to Italy for a year and coached at a really young age, but what was the exact moment you knew, like a sports agency or you being a sports agent was really the route you wanted to take? Because I know reading through some things you said, like you just mentioned, a lot of people in your family either expected you to be a coach or a scout. That was the two main parameters of the position. And then here you are saying, you know what, I'm going to blaze my own trail real quick and go this door number 3 into sports agencies. So what was the moment you were like, okay, this is it?
Well, I spent my whole life, thinking I was going to be a player. I mean, I ended up being a player at a decent level, but I mean, I always thought I was going to, follow in the footsteps of Larry Bird. But even during that time, it was always the plan. Hey, I'm going to get into coaching. I'm, be a general manager. That was always the long-term goal from, being
Right.
5, 6, 7 years old. The agency stuff, it was never even really planned. What had happened was I was sort of courted by Wasserman Media Group to do a summer internship when I finished at the University of Arizona. So I went there, I did some stuff in the office. I worked for Arn Tellem and Bob Myers, a number of the agents there, Wasserman. But my primary responsibility was assisting Dave Yeager, who was a D-League coach at the time, do all their pre-draft workouts. So I worked for the agency, the sports agency, but I still didn't have any intentions of being an agent. From there, I took the job in Italy as a coach. And that's when I started, kind of thinking outside the box. I think part of it, I was a little homesick, even though it was amazing out there. I mean, it was one of the greatest places I've ever been in my life, much less lived. I I wasn't quite sure I wanted to be a coach. I didn't like the regimented schedule. I liked, I generally like things that are a little looser and I can be a little more creative. Being a coach, I mean, I've talked to my cousins about this a lot too, is, you're on the schedule of the team. I mean, you got shoot arounds, you got practice. I mean, it's just around the clock regimented schedule. And I didn't like it. I didn't know if it was a good fit for me. And I'd become friends with Sam Goldfeder of Excel Sports Management. It really, turned into a mentor for me. And I called, to pick his brain about, hey, what about, me working in the agency business? And one thing led to another. And I took a job, moved back to LA, started work for them. And, it was just, one job opportunity after another. And next thing I knew, it had been 10 plus years. And I working as an agent and on the agency side of things. And that's really why I got out of it. Cause I never really intended to be in it. So,
Right.
It's sort of a crazy roller coaster.
Now, don't take offense to what I'm about to say, because this is just from a very non-sports agent person who's never had this position. But obviously, the first thing I think of when I hear sports agent is always Jerry Maguire and that movie and how, he tries to do his office manifesto, go out on his own, do all that stuff. And I don't know if that's the general consensus in terms of the public that's not, doesn't know too much about this industry. But what is the kind of the expectations versus reality, like what they show in Hollywood versus really what it's like? And I'm sure you could probably talk about that for hours, but just some of the main things that maybe, we get wrong in terms of assumptions with sports agents.
Sure. And first of all, I don't take offense to that at all. I mean, I think Jerry Maguire was a great reflection of what an agent's job and life is like. I mean, of course I can nitpick certain different things that are different, but for the most part, I mean, the highs and the lows, I mean, that's exactly what it's like being an agent. You got that scene where he's just signed, Kush or whatever, and he's driving, he's trying to find the right song, and he's in the middle of nowhere, and the Tom Petty comes on. I've done that a million times. Like that is a real thing. Like when you sign the good player, or you get a big deal done, that rush of adrenaline is like nothing else. Getting fired, by the number one pick on the day of the draft, that kind of stuff happens though too. So it's just, you got your extreme highs and your extreme lows. And for me, it was exhausting for me. It was just, and then on top of it, I did a lot of international business. I was working around the clock. I was traveling like crazy. I really probably stretched myself too thin. And it's just, and then you're dealing with a lot of, high maintenance guys, and not all of my clients were like that, but how they sort of depicted the character in Jerry Maguire, the Cuba Gooding Jr. role.
Right.
There's a lot of guys like that. And so, just I think to sum it up, a roller coaster. I mean, being an agent is just, it's nuts.
Yeah, and one of the most unique things I think that comes with being a sports agent, obviously, is kind of being in this management / sales role. At the heart of it, you're a salesperson because you're having to sell your agency and yourself to new clients, and players are, that's a revolving door every single year. And I think one of the things that people don't really know much about on the sports agency side is what all goes into finding new clients and what that process looks like, because you have hundreds and hundreds of players going from being, in the collegiate realm to stepping into the professional world, now able to have representation. So tell me what it's like prospecting and finding new clients as a sports agent.
Well, I mean, that was one big part of why I wanted to get out, is, the whole recruiting process, courting new clients. It's just ugly. And a lot of it I feel is not done real straight up. I mean, the questions that are being asked and sort of demands at times during these recruiting meetings are a little bogus. I mean, really what should be talked about is, an agent, how are you going to help advise this player and give him the exposure he needs to succeed, find his first job and go from there. And I feel a lot of times during that process, money is always talked about, whether it's, the sleazy bribe type money, or simply just, hey, paying for pre-draft training, or where, what apartment you're going to live in, which is all things that I don't think, players and parents should prioritize, but they always do. As far as identifying players, this day and age, it's not rocket science. I mean, you can look at all these mock drafts and figure out what a guy's value is to a certain extent. And then, talking to NBA people, getting your list of guys and getting some feedback. Hey, what do you think of this player? Is he worth signing? Kind of getting a grip of guys' market value, so you could determine, is this a good investment, for me and my agency. But yeah, no, it's finding new clients is the hardest part of the business. And somebody once said to me, an agent is only as good as his client list. And that, the longer I worked in that business, the more I found that to be, true. And, I really try to keep my hands clean recruiting. And I got pretty frustrated because I felt like I was really improving each year as an agent. My client list wasn't improving as much as I was as an agent. That's a frustrating business to be in my opinion, because it's just, if you're improving at something, you want to see the results, and it wasn't proportional for me. And a lot of that's on me. I just, should have done a better job being more aggressive recruiting. I just, I was always careful of not, compromising my integrity, and that kind of business. It's a tough thing to do.
I can definitely imagine. So Matt, take me inside what a contract negotiation would be like. Like you just mentioned, how some of those, higher level elite athletes, sometimes can be a little more difficult than others. But what does that really take in terms of what are you actually negotiating when it's on the table for these big deals?
Well, I mean, it really depends on who you're representing. I mean, there's so many different contracts in professional basketball, whether it's a superstar deal in the NBA or a fringe player in the NBA or guys overseas, which is just a whole nother conversation. And depending on how hot of a commodity your player is, determines how much leverage you have. And so if you're a player that's just, you're having to knock the door down on an NBA team or whatever team just to get in, you pretty much take whatever they'll give you. So there's not much of a negotiation. It's more of like a begging and pleading type.
Happy
thing.
to be here, guys. Thank you.
And you represent LeBron James. It's like, all right, well, I want everything, And so there's a wide range of negotiating tactics, just depending on who you're representing, how much leverage you have. And so I know that's kind of a vanilla answer for you, but it's a pretty wide scope as far as what you can do. I mean, the NBA, a lot of the contract is pretty standard. Money, guaranteed money, term. Those are the most important things. Injuries, pre-existing injuries, or other, usual, sticking points. I personally always try to avoid getting, or prioritizing bonuses. Some teams try to, put a lot of incentives in there. I really try to keep it simple and, hey, let's get money and let's give you time, and that's the most important things. But I think there's a million different ways of doing it.
Right.
Building that trust and that relationship with your clients, and having and holding that fiduciary duty to make sure that you have the best deals on the table for them, the most exposure. How did you go about gaining trust from players who don't know you, right? They don't necessarily come from the same background that you do. They're just trying to get the best deal, get the most money, and get into the realm of professional sports. So how did you go to build that trust and have those players really trust that you had their best interests?
I think I had a huge advantage growing up in basketball, being a coach's son, and being a player. I felt like I was able to relate to a lot of different people in different places. I mean, I represent players from Europe, from Asia, I mean, anywhere, and, just being able to communicate with them and understand what they were going through and what they were trying to do, I think was really important. The relationship between an agent and a player, is really changes depending on the person, you're representing and what they're looking for in the relationship too. I mean, I had certain players, really wanted me to be, I started young. So at first it was more of like a brother, best friend type, relationship. As I got older, it kind of turned more into like a big brother, father type role. And then other players just simply wanted just like a contract agent. I mean, they wanted me to negotiate their deal. They didn't really want me babysitting them and checking in on them all the time. And again, it was just a very wide variety of relationships within my client list.
And so you start there, talking about sports agencies and being a sports agent, and then you just eventually decide to transition into more of covering the NBA on that side. What drove you to make that decision? And were there ever really any thoughts of, is this the right thing for me? Or, essentially that kind of career FOMO?
Well, I mean, again, similar to how I fell in the agency business, I never planned on working in the media. I mean, I absolutely never planned to work in the media. That was not something I ever even thought about at all. And what happened was, before I got out of the agency business, I spent a couple years, sort of, what would be the right word? Just getting annoyed with all the little stuff, all the little negatives within the agency business, and started getting the itch to get out, get back close to my roots, working directly in basketball. And, I was kind of, behind the scenes, kind of throwing out some feelers to the NBA teams if they'd be interested in hiring me to a scouting position. To make a long story short, I accepted a job verbally with a team to be a scout 3 years before I even got out of the business. And what had happened was the assistant GM told me that his boss was going to hire one of his former teammates as a scout, and that he was given the authority to pick his own scout too. He said, I'm his guy. That the GM was going on vacation for 2 weeks. When he got back, I'd have my contract, the whole deal. 2 weeks go by. The guy calls me and says, I've got bad news. We're not hiring you, and I'm being demoted, and I might be getting fired. And so I'm like, oh boy, okay, back to the drawing board. At this point, it was late in summer, and I was still operating as an agent. So I said, okay, I'll go through this one more year, being an agent, and take a stab at it the following year. Didn't really have any luck that following year. And I had a phone interview with Lawrence Frank, who's looking to hire some people to his scouting staff. And Lawrence is a very candid guy. I mean, he just speaks his mind. There's not a whole lot of filter there. And he really did me a favor. He was asking me different questions. How well do I know the players? How much direct experience do I have in scouting? And it was, at first I got off the phone feeling a little disrespected. I felt like, just kind of with my background growing up in the NBA, being a player, and then, just working in the agency business with sort of, a basketball, person's intent with how I operate day to day. I thought I warranted a little bit more respect on the basketball front. He didn't give it to me, and essentially told me he wanted somebody with more experience, and asked for one of my uncle's numbers. So it that really woke me up of like, you know what, maybe people don't see me the same way I see myself. I need to make a change because I don't want to be an agent for the rest of my life. I want to work in basketball. And so I spent one more year as an agent with a plan of kind of getting out. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time recruiting, represented a few guys for that draft, and kind of got my wife on board to make a drastic move because I just thought I'd be, kind of in quicksand. The longer I stay in the agency business, the further I was getting away from my roots. Pulled the plug on everything. I was able to kind of sell off some of my I had an agency in the United States and an agency in Asia. Sold my agencies to my partners. I had a little bit of a nest egg. Started volunteer scouting for Marty Blake and Associates, which was a scouting service that was initially put together by the NBA. Did that, just volunteered to do that. Ryan Blake, Marty's son, was running it. And so I started just pretty much operating on my own, sending scouting reports to Ryan, paying my way everywhere. And during that time, Sports Illustrated contacted me, asking me if I would be interested in writing a series of articles about the NBA draft from an agent's perspective. And that was my entry point to media. And so it was the whole thing. Again, I mean, my whole career has pretty much just been a roller coaster. It really hasn't slowed down at all. And so I did that for a while, and kind of got a grip of how everything worked, and decided to launch Babcock Hoops and kind of control the whole deal and have my own infrastructure. And that's really kind of taken a life of its own. And so here I am.
Yeah, and it's an absolutely incredible story, and I can just imagine Lawrence Frank and that phone call and what that must have sounded like. So, just great stuff there. But I want to ask you about the NBA draft, because obviously now at Babcock Hoops, that's where you focus the majority of your time, is planning, talent evaluating, and obviously that's been a little bit disrupted this year with the pandemic. But still, the draft goes on year after year. These players keep coming through, and it's more and more to evaluate. But what is it about the NBA draft to you that you find so much fun to cover, or so special compared to all the other things that are out there to cover?
I mean, again, just going back to my childhood, I've always loved the NBA draft. I mean, I've always obsessed about it. I mean, I felt like a lot of stuff I'm doing now, I was doing when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old, as far as like doing mock drafts and evaluating guys and picking my dad's brain on what they're doing, and just being a shadow with my dad. I mean, I used to, go to the Milwaukee Bucks practice facility for all their draft workouts. When I was in high school, I'd pick up guys at the airport, and I've just always been very passionate about it. And that's the one part of my dad and my uncle's business that I was always intrigued with the most. I mean, the evaluating college players and international players, and trying to figure out the ins and outs of each draft. It's just always been a passion of mine. So when I had an opportunity to do it as a career, of course I wanted to do it. And so it's just been, I've really just enjoying every single day with what I'm doing.
And that's what I want to ask. I guess my next question on is what about what you're doing now, brings you the most joy compared to the other aspects of what you did in basketball previously?
Well, I mean, just comparing the different jobs, I will say it's really nice, being somebody that everybody needs now, rather than just getting yelled at all the time as an agent, And
Right.
so, I walk into a gym and I'm welcomed all the time. Everybody's nice to me, and unless it's a dad that thinks I have his, kid rated too low or whatever. But, compared to being an agent, there was just so much negativity on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you tell somebody you're an agent and there's just such a negative stigma that comes along with it. And I'm just having fun now. I mean, I'm sort of deal where like my natural personality is the network and make friends and help my friends and just, so I'm, traveling, across the United States and the world, just watching basketball, making new friends and talking hoops. And I'm really, really lucky, for what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I'm jealous. I've told you this before, but I think you've got one of the most fun jobs out there to be able to cover the draft full time, and just to be able to go through that. I've told my friends this since I was 9 or 10. The NBA draft is a holiday to me. It's a day marked on the calendar. Alex knows this. I get friends that come over, and Louisville is the #1 draft market in the entire country. I love that about Louisville. Anyways, let's move on here. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was, some of the people that you've worked with and some of the big names in the game of basketball that you've gotten to rub shoulders with, Bob Myers being one of them, Andy Miller, a couple of the other big agents. Is there anybody in your mind that you kind of have looked up to, that you've kind of taken away and has really shaped your influence outside of your family and that immediate basketball family that you're working with now?
I mean, I've really worked for so many different companies and agents and had partnerships. A few names that come to mind. I mean, working for Arn Tellem, that summer internship, that was pretty cool. Arn at the time was the biggest agency in all of sports, in basketball and baseball. So it started there. Bob was still a relatively young guy, but I mean, the success that he's had, obviously getting to know him has been great. And then Sam Goldfeder, Excel Sports Management, he's Jeff Schwartz's partner. That guy is really, early on in my career was just a huge influence on me and really just went out of his way to help me and kind of kickstart my career. Those are the guys early on that really set things up. And then working for Andy, I'm gonna write an article about this here soon. But Andy, it's interesting. He's you guys said he's one of the most famous agents. He's probably the most infamous agent, obviously, with everything that's gone on the last couple of years with the FBI investigation, all that. And there's been so much negative that's talked about him. But I will say, he's probably the smartest guy I've worked for or with. I mean, everybody thinks that he was successful just because he cheated. Obviously that helped, when you're taking care of AU coaches and players and whatnot. But I really learned from him how to get organized and really operate every day with intent. And so, I didn't work for him for very long for a number of reasons. But I did learn a lot from Andy, and I'm thankful for that time with him.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be a very interesting experience, even regardless of the length of time, but no, just the amount of stuff you can learn on a day-to-day. But Matt, we always finish the show with one very simple question, and it's not totally finished because we are going to have some quick what we call before the buzzer, where we're just going to rattle off some really quick one answer questions. But we always like to finish the actual interview portion, and you can answer this however you want, whatever it means to you. But what does basketball or a life in basketball really mean to you?
Oh, I've never thought of it like that. For me, if I were to kind of just, summarize it, I think of my family, and it's really kept us so close. And, and it started with my dad and 2 uncles, like they're the 3 brothers growing up, their parents, nobody had played basketball before them. And my oldest uncle Pete was a, decent high school player. And then he became a high school coach, and my middle uncle Rob, followed his footsteps, and my dad followed him, and then passed it on to me and my cousins. And it's just really a beautiful thing that our family is so close because of this game, and it's, sometimes you lose sight that it's just a fun game. And, it's all, it's something that's really, dominated all of our lives and given us careers and, taken us all around the world. And, but most importantly, it's kept us close. And that's what, basketball means to me the most, is it's the Babcock family sport.
Yeah, Alex mentioned it before the last question there. We're going to move into our last part of the show here. And again, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for, just talking about your career in the NBA and the NBA and the basketball family. But like you said, this is titled Before the Buzzer. We're just going to fire off a couple of questions for you here, and we'll move through these quickly. I'll start first. What's the most notable achievement in your mind for yourself as a sports agent?
I represented, at the time, it was the most lucrative contract for a second-round pick in NBA history for Jordan Mickey. So I mean that was a pretty big one. It was with the Celtics. So it was Danny Ainge, who's one of the most experienced GMs. That was a deal I kind of felt like I'd hang my hat on a little bit.
I like that one. Favorite team or person to negotiate with?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of one of these things where you're friends with everybody until you start negotiating. Right. So,
Right.
I don't have a good answer.
I actually need something now. Hold on.
Right.
All right. If you could start your own NBA franchise today with one current player, who would it be?
One current NBA player. I mean, it'd have to be Giannis or Luka. You know, I'm gonna stay loyal to Giannis though.
If you put Giannis on that team, I'm putting that wall around you, and you're not scoring, man. You're not scoring.
So speaking of franchise,
sorry.
oh my bad. What city would you pick to start an NBA franchise in?
Well, you know, my family we spent our whole lives going to Newport, Rhode Island. We kind of small market, but it'd be kind of sweet to have a team in our town.
I just got back from Providence.
Nice.
First time ever. It was great.
All right. Best draft prospect that you've covered so far?
Best draft. I mean, Zion Williamson. You know, I mean, I was at the ACC tournament where he came back from his injury, where he blew out that shoe. I was sitting like fifth row. I was sitting next to Michael Finley. I think I was sitting next to Michael Finley that day. And, it was Duke versus Carolina. That was pretty cool. That guy he was special, or he is special.
And then final question: number one pick in the NBA draft this year is?
Sort of a loaded question because I think Minnesota's going to trade. But if I were to bet on it, I would say Anthony Edwards is probably going to be the number one pick. Even though on our mock draft it says Obi Toppin right now. That's why I said it was a loaded question. But I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards.
Awesome. Well, Matt Babcock, thank you so much for joining us. You guys can catch his work at Babcock Hoops. If you're into the NBA draft, that is the place to be. You're not going to find much better coverage, including scouting and all of the above. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us and hope to talk to you soon, my friend.
Hey, thanks, guys. Keep in touch.
Yep.